Hi guys, welcome back. So the question is, who is the greatest? And in this case, who is the greatest British and Irish Lions team of the professional era? Now I'm counting that as 1997 onwards. It's a little bit arbitrary, but rugby went professional around 95, and sure, in 2017 they were more professional than in 97, but hey, it'll do. Plus 97 was the first tour that I really remember, and I don't really want to do videos on stuff that I don't remember. So anyway, I thought, UK's in lockdown, I'm working from home, I'm going to have time to make these videos, but actually with homeschooling, family life, etc., I've actually had less time. But anyway, I want to get this series off and running, and most importantly, it's going to be your vote, as in a proper vote this time, where I'm going to have the YouTube card come up the top when I finish my little preamble, and you guys are actually going to have the chance to vote on which is the greatest. I'm going to compare that with what I think is the greatest, my top three, and see if, you know, the three most popular answers match that or not, or if I'm way off. Anyway, it's going to be interesting, so your vote coming up when you see the card, I'll let you know. Sure, please comment, tell us what you've done, talk about these Lions tours, but really I'm not going to count the vote unless it's in the YouTube vote when that card comes up. And then I'll give you a week or so, let's say a week, and then I'll come back with the results, see if it matches what you think, what I think, and go from there. So, the greatest British and Irish Lions tour of the professional era, starting with 1997. Now, loads of people will remember this tour fondly because, well, there was the first DVD out, you know, Living with Lions, and the players were very naive in a good way. They didn't really understand media back then, so I think they put a lot more on camera than they would do these days, and you got a great feel of the tour and really got an idea of what was going on with the partying, etc., the fun and games. They got in trouble for a few bits and pieces, but it's great because you wouldn't get that now. So that's a bit of a classic, the DVD. Now, if you think that's a key factor for saying it's the greatest tour, go for it. I don't care what factors you put as most important. I'm just going to give my take on these tours. You'll probably get an idea of what I think, but I want to know what you think. Anyway, it was a great tour. They won the Test Series 2-1. They did lose one midweek match, but they won 9 of the 10 of those, and the series finished on that famous Jeremy Guscott drop goal. I don't think some of the players were massively happy that it was Guscott that got it, because I'm not sure he was the most popular player around, but anyway, it was an iconic moment, and the Lions get the win, and for me, winning a series certainly makes it a better tour, but might not the be-all and end-all. So let's have a look at the actual Test Series. I'll put the scores up on the side there. So first game went to British and Irish Lions, 25-16, big win. Then they take the second game very closely, 18-15, and the series is over. But they do take their foot off the pedal. They rotate a lot of players. They know they've won it already. I reckon they'd had some partying before that final match as well. And they lost it quite heavily, 35-16. So they didn't get the clean sweep. But anyway, a very successful tour. Now, looking at the players, now absolutely some greats. You know, your goal kicking of Jenkins, your finishing of Ian Evans. Scott Gibbs was an absolute cannonball of a player. And interestingly, players like Bentley and Tate, Gibbs was at ex-Rugby League as well, Cornell was ex-Rugby League. They actually brought a lot of early professionalism to this tour, as in the way they prepared, because rugby union players were really just feeling out the professional era, and they were still amateur players, kind of getting paid for it, kind of preparing a bit more. But those rugby league players, I think, had a massive influence on this tour, and were some of the best players actually. Dawson was a fantastic player. You know, and also they had players that were fighting for their place and got in that you wouldn't have thought would have got in before. I mean, these days you can kind of pick the Test team a bit closer, I think. But you know, Tom Smith and Wallace at prop, you wouldn't have said maybe were starters straight away. Well, Keith Wood you probably would have. And also they had a leader in Martin Johnson who wasn't a regular captain. He was a little bit out of the blue, and what an inspired choice, because he went on to be one of the greatest leaders of all time. So anyway, that's the 1997 tour. I certainly rate it fairly highly. Do you think it's the greatest? Well, put a vote in the when the vote card comes up and let us know. So the next tour in 2001 was to Australia, and this team was a star-studded team. They thought they had a great chance, but they lose the series 2-1. They also drop a tour match, and the number of total matches actually drops down. There are 10 matches in all. As we know, getting into professionalism now, the Lions tour is getting squeezed, and that's a pressure that will continue to be on the Lions. But they lose one tour match, win 6, and then lose the Test series 2-1. So ultimately, a failure in a way. And there were some negatives from the tour. Graham Henry wasn't the most popular leader. And in the middle of it, Matt Dawson actually came up with some newspaper columns slating the management team and the training, which is definitely not what you do mid-tour. Maybe afterwards, maybe not at all. But anyway, it was a star-studded team, and they won that first Test 29-13, including Jason Robinson's famous in and out, beating a player in a phone box. I think it was Latham, the fullback. Fantastic finish. Robinson's try in the 2003 World Cup final is a more famous try, but I think this one's a lot better and what a lot of people remember him for. I certainly remember watching that try and thinking, wow, we've got a chance, and then it goes away. But in the second Test, they've got a massive chance to put this series to bed. But this Australia team is one of the best Australia teams. It had lots of greats in there. We'll go through the teams in a minute. And they get the win, and it's probably a better Australia team than when the Lions won in 2017. So you might want to take that into account when you're voting. I don't know. But then after half time, I think it's Joe Roth, gets 2 quick tries, really good tries as well. And then they get the big win, to level out the series. And then it's 35-14. 35-14 the second win, and the momentum's with the home team, and they finish it off in a very tight Test at the end, and Australia clinch that win, and the Lions have blown their chance. I don't know if it was down to training or whatever, but certainly when you look through that team, you've got the likes of Brian O'Driscoll absolutely flying, Robinson, Wilkinson, Vickery Johnson, Back, Quinnell all in there, Keith Wood still in there, so really strong team. They knew they had a chance, but Australia were just too good. And there were some all-time greats in that Australia team. Latham, one of the most underrated fullbacks in world rugby, looks like, when he started the game like he was knackered already, socks around his ankles, but he really was one of the best. And in the likes of Gregan in there, obviously an all-time great. Still had the likes of John Eales, George Smith was just coming through there, so fantastic team. And it was too good for the Lions in the end. So that's 2001, but still, that first win was very good and some great players in there. Do you think it's your best British and Irish Lions tour? Right, next is 2005, and yes, we do have to talk about this tour. The British and Irish Lions go to New Zealand and they lose 3-0, and they don't just lose, they get hammered and they're nowhere near. And after the tour, it was definitely slated highly. Clive Woodward, the World Cup winning coach, went in there, very professional, kind of does what Clive Woodward does and goes over the top, but there was no one to pull him back, and he had this massive entourage. He went ultra professional, but kind of maybe missed the human element. They separated out the Test team and the midweek team, which was a really bad idea. There was never this vibe, the multicultural vibe that you want from a Lions side. And also he relied very heavily on an English backbone, players who had served him well in the World Cup, but maybe some who weren't quite at their best, and it really all backfired. And he just went from bad to worse when O'Driscoll gets dumped on his head, apparently accidentally, but that's for another video. And they go on to be creamed in all 3 tests, with a New Zealand team with the likes of Carter and McCaw coming through, and really, really strong in their backyard, certainly schooled the Lions. Do you think it's the best Lions tour ever? Maybe there's a different reason. Clearly, I don't think so, little spoiler there, but maybe you do. Put a vote if you do when the card comes up. Now 2009 was a really interesting tour, and I've got mixed feelings here, so I don't quite know which way to go. It could either be a great tour or a failure really, because they did lose the tour 2-1. And they'd lost 2 consecutive tours. They got battered against New Zealand in the last tour, but they'd learned their lessons from more the cold approach from maybe Henry and Woodward that didn't work. They went back to McGeechan, and by all accounts it was a really happy camp, a happy tour, where they got back to more of that old school vibe in the modern era, and they really enjoyed themselves, and most people speak very highly of that tour, especially the players. They were playing South Africa, who were reigning world champions, as they will be when we go back there next year. But it wasn't as good a team as that 2007 team, I believe, and they did have a chance to win. This Lions team was very good, but yeah, they lose very narrowly in the first two tests. They're devastated, they're blown their chance, and they do get some very emotional redemption in the third game. Guys like Monnier, like Vickery, showing they can do it, but it was too late. But they did have a good vibe to the tour. They finished on a positive, so I don't quite know where I think that one sits. I mean, looking at the sides, very good size, but I do think that Lions team was good enough to do the job, but maybe the unity of the South African side playing together was too much. Like Tommy Bowe was playing brilliantly, Jamie Roberts was tearing it up, Mike Phillips is an absolute tank of a number 9. Paul O'Connell and Alan Wynne in the second row. It was a really good team, but they did blow it a little bit in those tight games, even though they made up for it a little bit in the end. Anyway, if you think 2009 was the greatest tour of the professional era, pop a vote for that one. In 2013, it wasn't make or break, but it was getting close because the Lions needed a test win to say they were relevant and competitive in this professional era. And they get it, 2-1. But what a thrilling tour it was for me. The Lions knew they had a good chance. They had a very strong team. Australia were good, but they weren't an all-time great team. They had some very dangerous players, and they fought really hard in this series, which made it a great contest for sure. Now, if the Lions failed to win, like I said, it was going to be problems for the Lions, and they brought Warren Gatland in. He stepped up to the plate, as did the big players as well. So in that first game, it was very much, tight games. Key kicks winning those first two games, one for the Lions, one for Australia, set it up unbelievably nicely. But then the Lions' quality in that third test did break through, and they ran riot in the end, putting the series to bed. I think it was a 16-41 victory, and they may well have saved that Lions concept moving forward. Looking at the teams, Australia had some absolute game breakers. Falau was tearing it up. Beale was a hell of a player. But you look at the Lions team, there's a quality all the way through there. Lee Halfpenny was at his best. You had the likes of Davis and O'Driscoll, probably the best partnership you could get really going there. Corbusiero was in his pomp before injury ended that. The likes of Warburton, absolutely in his prime. Adam Jones scrummaging, etc. Makavanapola was also playing great. It was really, really strong team, and they got it done. So was that tour in 2013 to Australia the greatest tour for you? Now, the latest tour in 2017 was a draw in New Zealand. That is a great feat to do, to even draw a series, but it was controversial. So I don't quite know exactly how I feel about it, even though I enjoyed the tour, I enjoyed the games. The end of the last game was a bit of a letdown, but you can't have it all the time. But anyway, it was one of the best New Zealand teams of all time, and I've done lots of videos on this. I did the whole tour as a video series, so click on that playlist. Indeed, I did the 2013 tour as well. But in that first test, New Zealand were comfortable winners, and that was a real worry because this was a strong Lions team, but they just got taken to the cleaners by a fantastic New Zealand team full of absolute greats. Like I said, one of the best New Zealand teams ever to take the field. But then in the second test, it was tight, and it already turned when Sonny Bill, rush of blood to the head, gets sent off for a high shot, and then the Lions actually have to fight back. New Zealand was so good, they were still looking like they could win with 14. Then the highlight, that Falatau try out wide, a brilliant try, pulls them back into the game, and they get the win to keep the series alive. The third test was a nail-biter, really close. Again, there was a bit of discipline there. Kano gets a yellow, which doesn't help New Zealand, but at least it was just 10 minutes. But, it was so tight. And then at the end, that controversy where Ken Owens catches the ball in the offside position. Now, I'm not going to go through that incident. I've done it to death in my videos on that series, so have a look. He immediately releases the ball, but the referee signals for offside penalty. Then he has a big conflab with his officials and he changes his mind. I just couldn't believe that he changed his mind. Whether it was the right decision, leave that for my previous video. But anyway, the Lions hang on for the draw. And if you have a look at the teams, I mean, this New Zealand team was just staggeringly good. Ben Smith, one of the best all-round fullbacks of all time. Sonny Bill, if he hadn't got sent off, was playing great. Then Aaron Smith and Bowden Barrett, you just don't get a better halfback pairing. And the forwards were just fantastic at everything, ball playing and in the tight. Retallick was in his pomp. You got Kieran Reid captaining. You know, it was high quality. So to get a draw was a great result. But you look through the Lions team again, absolute quality there. Liam Williams, brilliant player. He was, had a great tour. Watson was tearing it up. Farrell was kicking the goals. You just go through the whole team. Furlong, Vunipola George were a top quality front row. A Toje in there. Sean O'Brien was absolutely epic. Faletau, etc. Great, probably the two best sets of teams to go head to head. But some controversy, so does it sit as the greatest tour of the professional era? Let me know. Okay, so here it is. Here is the vote card up below. Please click that vote card and just click on the one tour that you think is the greatest. Then I'll rank the top 3, come back in a week and let you know the results, see how it compares to mine. I won't cheat, you'll have to trust me. I'm not going to change my mind. I've made that decision already and written it down. But please do comment, any general comments on those tours, but your vote will only count if you clicked that vote card, so please do that. And I'll be back in a week with the results. Okay guys, until then, I'll see you later.